Guys, so it's November 16th, getting to the end of things with the book. As you see, look at that. We have a chapter that's filled with action, and as always, just making sure that my live streaming software is working. And hopefully, it is. Always encouraging everybody to support me. Tell people about the book, and hopefully people will buy it, because that would be great. I don't know why it's so slow. I just want to make sure it's streaming. It says waiting for frames. I use this caster IO. It seems to work. It seems to work pretty well once it kicks in, but it's a question of it kicking in. So we're in New Jersey. We had, it didn't rain. It was good. Kind of windy, blowy day. And hopefully it starts setting up here in a second, because I don't want anybody to miss anything from chapter 26. So we'll see what happens. I always do this, and then it's like I check and it says, oh, it's been streaming the whole time. I'm going to switch to classic view and see if that works better. Yeah, here we go. Classic view seems to, and the classic view, they had two views. They have the new upgraded view and then classic view. So I am live streaming at this moment. And I'm on to chapter 26. As you recall, they had seen an Persian imperial force, and Helena was really worried that something had happened to Valamir, and she had the thought of maybe she could be a translator of some sort, and Attila had the same idea. Actually, he's using her as bait. Well, not bait, but he's using her as to give them a thought that maybe they should talk, or if they were pirates, they would say parlay. Anyhow, in a smooth gallop, Pasiel, chapter 26. In a smooth gallop, Pasiel carried Helena across the steppes. His white mane streamed in rhythm to the steady beat of his hooves. Swept forward with the horsemen, Helena was no longer afraid. The movement had crystallized into small fragments. The odor of sweat from Pasiel's neck, the rumbling of the earth beneath the horses' hooves, and the chill wind at their backs. Valamir was laughing. His grimness had vanished. He was one with his horse, his shield and his sword at his side. Attila remained unchanged, and tense as ever, remorseless with cunning, and shouldering all responsibility for the tribe. He met Helena's glance with an ironic, if fleeting, smile, but did not break his silence. She could not tell if he was excited or not. The morning sun flirted with midday. On the horizon, they saw a cloud of dust created from the feet of marching men. Lifting his arm, Attila signaled a halt and scanned for higher ground. The undulating steppes offered no hills, just numerous crests rising from the plain. With an emphatic motion of his sword, he led his army to the highest one. As they waited for the Persians on the slight elevation, Helena's stomach churned with fear, and her throat felt constricted. Her thoughts were in turmoil at the prospect of confronting the Persian command. Less than a league away, he saw the Persians. Almost immediately, the thin sound of a trumpet traveled across the wind. The imperial command formed into lines, one behind the other, and prepared for battle. Their force was greater than Attila's. Helena estimated the number as 3,000, which was larger than what was reported by the scouts. Unbidden, she remembered that a unit of 1,000 was called a Hazarabam. They had deployed 3 of them in their search for Altier. Despite the greater number of soldiers, the Huns had the advantage. Except for a sizable number of horse and chariots, most of the Persian soldiers were on foot. Helena could see a few rows of heavy cavalry where the horses were covered in shining metal plates. The sun played on the metal, especially on the rider's armor. Helena was reminded of seated statues. There was a complement of light cavalry as well, and they were armed with bow and arrows. Helena had heard that Persians even used elephants in battle, but that fierce display was spared them on this day. She could see a few chariots positioned as a unit towards the center of the formation. The Huns rode as a light cavalry with bow and arrows and their short swords. Their capacity for quick maneuvering more than leveled the odds. Helena whispered to Valamir, her voice cracking, "Where's the shaman?" Valamir was composed, and his eyes were compassionate when they rested on her face. "He won't be far. Before we ride, he'll speak some words. Listen and trust it will survive." She smiled uncertainly, finding slender comfort in his soldier's creed. Ishiite and 2 other Huns joined them, their faces carefree and alive with anticipation. From horseback, the shaman spoke to their small group, using a mixture of Gothic, Hunnic, and some other language. His hands made strange gestures in a precise rhythm. He raised his staff, shaking the fur tassels that hung from its top. "It is done. May the Earth Mother fold you in her arms when you go forth upon her." Finished, his eyes, so vibrant and bright moments ago, became veiled and withdrawn, as if he no longer saw them. Helena felt abandoned. She needed more and did not want him to stop. But when his brown eyes lingered on her, she felt as if a beam of light swept up and down her spine and dissipated her terror. Melting into the ranks, he vanished as if he had never been. "Go with the gods, Valamir," Attila commanded. Theodemir galloped towards them, waving his arm. "Wait for me!" Attila scowled. "Please, Lord Attila, let me ride with my brother." "No, not today. I won't risk both of Valdarius' sons. Let me take his place. He is the heir. I honor your courage, but today requires Valamir's expertise. Have patience. Your time will come." As he accepted the decision, Theodemir's face fell. "Valamir, come back. Promise." Valamir smiled gently at his brother, his evident love at odds with his seasoned soldier's face. "I promise, Bevian." "The gods protect you always," Theodemir said, smiling with a show of bravado. "Until we meet next, Bevian," Valamir said. He turned to Helena. "We ride." Ishiite and 2 other Huns accompanied Valamir and Helena. They kept their horses at a slow trot as they set off toward the Persians. Valamir's approach was in a diagonal, rather than a straight line. Through his teeth he spoke to Helena. "They'd be blind not to see that we travel with a woman." When they reached the middle ground, Valamir raised his hand, signaling a halt, and faced the opposition. They waited silently, their heads held high, ignoring their enemy. The Persians' large rectangular shields were raised in anticipation of an attack, and their swords were thrust forward. Helena felt the prickling of arrows targeting her chest. Her heart pounded. She prayed. Her heart pounding, she prayed. The Persian commander, astride a magnificent black horse, wheeled his mount in a tight circle. Suddenly, Helena thought of Attila and his penchant for drama. As she recognized the Persian as a human being, not an evil archetype, she considered the possibility that he might listen to them. The commander shouted from the distance, but loudly enough for them to hear. "Erasames, see if you can understand those barbarians. Perhaps they know how to signal with their hands." Obedience was marked only by the clicking of the chariot's wheels. 3 chariots surrounded a horseman in a triangular formation. At a measured trot, The group approached. Insulted, Helena set her jaw and watched her grandfather's compatriots with narrowed eyes. The second in command was a lean, elongated man. His style of riding was indolent and loose. He had golden armor over his torso, and his head was protected by a helmet. As he pulled out his sword with an expert flourish, Valamir rested his hand on his hilt, quiet with confidence. 3 horse lengths away, the Persians halted. Arisames surveyed Valamir initiate, his contempt scarcely veiled. Helena was conscious of the plainness of her dress. When his eyes rested on her, his breath drew inward. He raised his sword in salute. "Greetings. You have come to surrender?" His blue eyes were like stones in an angular face. Helena edged Pasiel 2 paces forward, presenting herself in clear view. As she spoke in Persian, her voice was pitched low. "My name is Helena, daughter of Michaelia, granddaughter of Belusistram, to whom I have the honor of speaking." Arisames' face turned pale. "Impossible!" "Pray, excuse me, but I speak the truth." The Persian's brow creased with thought. "Your accent is unquestionably noble. I do not understand how you find yourself in such unsavory company. Explain yourself. My story is for your commander's ears." He pursed his lips. "You best be certain of your tale, Helena." Arisames jerked his head to a charioteer. "Tell our leader I require his expert judgment." Silently, Helena watched the chariot's progress back to the Persian line and to its broad-shouldered commander. After conferring a moment, the leader cantered his mount toward them. He was flanked on both sides by 2 other chariots, each drawn by a pair of sleek black horses. Helena's eyes were locked on the horseman. As he approached, she heard a roaring in her ears. She knew it had nothing to do with darkness and runes, but with the man himself. The way he sat his horse, his squared shoulders, his short cropped black hair gleaming in the sunlight. Joining Arisames, the commander acknowledged his subordinate with a curt nod. "The woman speaks Persian," the aide reported. Disdaining his guard's protection, the commander reined his horse to the forefront. He considered them no threat. He was not even wearing his helmet. His gaze rested first on Valamir. He returned the scrutiny in silence. Helena's temples throbbed. Into the void, Pasiel nickered, his whinny deep with recognition. The Persian's head jerked to the white stallion and Helena, who stared intently at the man. He had her grandfather's face, only younger, but lined with disdain. "Pasiel," he said with disbelief. The stallion's ears pointed forward and he neighed again. The Persian's dark blue eyes flashed with pain, but he staunched his distress with hostility. "Where did you get this horse?" he said, barely looking at her, and with no recognition. Helena answered in Persian, her tone exquisite with repressed anger. "The same place where I got my sword." She held it up so the sunlight glinted off its silver sheath. "He is dead then. My father's dead." Helena was vehement. "You are correct, father. He died as we searched for you." "No," he said, looking at her closely for the first time. "It cannot be." Overwhelmed by emotion, she closed the distance between them, her green eyes flashing. Forgetting everything, Attila's mission, the 2 armies poised to strike for battle, Helena was alone with him on the windy steps. "Look at me. I am the child you left behind in Constantinople. I survived, but no thanks to you." "Helena, you could be your mother," he said, his voice hushed. His grief dampened her fiery outrage. Remembering the circumstance of their meeting, she took a deep breath, steadying herself. "This is my husband, Prince Valamir of the Ostrogoths. The fact that I'm alive, I owe to him." She turned to Valimir, his hand still poised on his sword. "Meet Michaelia, my father," she said in Greek. Valimir raised his right eyebrow in surprise. With a slight nod of his head, he acknowledged his father-in-law in the same language. "It is an honor to meet you." Michaelia frowned. "I thank you for protecting Helena. In appreciation of your services, I shall not accuse you of the crime of raptus, though you wed my daughter without permission. Indeed, you shall have a just reward." Finished with Valimir, he turned to Helena. "A most favorable union awaits you, but don't worry. I am certain your betrothed will be able to forgive your unfortunate loss of virginity. After all, his interest, nay, his passion, rested in our ancient and noble bloodlines." Helena's face tightened with shock. Within seconds of being reunited with her father, his first thought was to arrange a marriage that would work to his advantage. She shifted her weight on Paisiel, signaling him to step backward. "How dare you? I'm not your chattel," she said in Persian. "You are not my father. He's dead. Dead these 5 long years. Until his last breath, he tried to keep me safe." Do not forget my rights, Helena. Under both Roman and Persian law, you are guilty. Your marriage to this barbarian does not exist. As a woman, you can't understand the magnitude of my arrangements. Come with me quietly, and I shall not punish you for your disrespect." Her cheeks grew hot. She itched to slap him, to wipe the arrogance from his face. Choked with hate born of hurt, she felt the familiar darkness seeping into her and feeding her rage. The hollow voice was close, nestled within her mind. It craved to be unleashed and sweetened its demands with the promise of invincibility. She refused its call. She did not want to pay its price with more of her soul. With quick precision, she drew the light sign on Paisiel's neck and breathed deeply, releasing the dark power to the sun. She felt cleansed, as if shedding a loathsome burden. Michaelia stared at her with avid intensity. Deeply unsettled, Helena concentrated on delivering Attila's message and kept her voice flat and neutral. "The Huns have rescued the child, Altair. She is safe. They have in their possession a woman, Rodinia. Their leader, Attila, requires a meeting to discuss terms." She pulled the pendant from beneath her coat. "Altair lent me this to prove the story." Michaelia reached for it. Attila shook her head. "I promised to return it to her." Her father studied the emblem on her chest and then looked into his daughter's face. "Does the Hun ask for ransom?" "No, but he hopes for a fair reward." Michaelia nodded his head once. "That is just," he asked, almost as an afterthought. "What of the guards?" "Regrettably, they are dead. I must inform you that once Altair's abduction was uncovered, Rodinia was questioned extensively. The Huns did our work for us. The moment the child was seized, the traitors were marked for death." Michaelia's eyes glinted. "Rodinia has much to confess." "My leader, Lord Attila, would meet with you," Valimir said in his accented Greek. Looking down his thin nose, Michaelia examined Valimir. His eyes were the same brilliant blue as her grandfather's, but were remote and almost devoid of humanity. "How is it you speak Greek as a native of Thrace?" Valimir's face was expressionless. "My mother was Thracian." For an instant, Helena saw pain in Michaelia's aloof eyes. "So was my first wife. Helena's resemblance to her mother is striking." "Indeed," Valimir said, "from the beginning she reminded me of my mother. Perhaps the two women were related." Michaelia's superior expression softened. "In Thrace, the bloodlines run together. Unless your mother lives, we'll never know." Staring at Helena, her father's eyes became wistful with memory. All at once she remembered how his laughter filled the house in Constantinople, and her heart hurt. His voice was hoarse. "You must stay with me, Helena. We've lost too many years. The marriage I arranged is with Altair's true father. The honor of being one of the Emperor's wives should take your breath away. Every luxury would be yours. You have never seen the grandeur and magnificence of the Persian, of your Persian heritage. The Emperor's palaces are without rival in the world. When she did not answer him, he continued, "And Altira's alone now, with no one to protect her in the harem. She needs a woman's love. You can give her that." "Father," Lena said, finding her voice and pointing to Valimir, "this is my husband, and the wise Lord willing, I shall grow old with him. Not once have you asked me about me or about your father." "I have a husband," she repeated, "and I love him." "Helena," Valimir said, "let Ishiat take you back. You do not need to translate for us." "If she leaves," Michaela said, "there will be no meeting with your leader." "You will see Helena soon. Do you forget Altira's importance to your emperor?" Valimir asked. Michaela's hand was at his sword. His lips twisted. "You dare to remind me of my duty?" "I'll say, Valimir," Helena interrupted. "It's for the best." "If that's what you want, Helena," Valimir said. He called Ishiat closer and spoke to him in rapid Hunnic. Hun nodded his head once and wheeled his horse back to Attila. "Attila should know that you are Helena's father," Valimir said. "As you wish," Michaela said, then spoke in Persian. "Helena, did my father die in peace?" "No. He fought death. He died with a curse on his lips and blood on his hands," she said, answering him in Greek. Michaela's eyes shone, betraying his fervor. He whispered with repressed excitement, "Did he show you the rune?" "I saw it," she said nonchalantly, enjoying the look of frustration on his face. Show me what he did," he commanded. "I will not." You are disobedient." "Perhaps, but if grandfather had trusted you, he would have taught you himself." She hesitated. Her chest was tight. "Evil comes with the power." "How do you know, Helena?" Michaela asked. His voice reminded her of a snake, hissing softly. She stared at him, watching the play of emotions cross his face. It was dominated by greed. Once summoned, the power is exquisite. But the wielder of the rune is not the master, but its victim. A presence comes with it, feeding from the one who calls it forth, leeching away the life force. If grandfather hadn't used his last strength, invoking it, hoping to protect me, he might have lived. The curse is two-edged, cutting where you least expect. I survived, as grandfather commanded, but not my son. She paused. "That surprises you, father? That you had a grandson? A fine boy? But he's dead now, murdered before my eyes." Michaela gasped. His voice was a low sob. "Who did this to our family? I demand his head." Stung by his method of reprisal, Lena covered her mouth with her hand. "He's a dead man, though his body still fouls the earth. I cursed him with my own blood. But, father, it was not well done." "Helena, you're a woman. It needs a man's strength to work the dark magic." "No, father, you don't understand. It's foul, evil." "You know nothing. Even the priest dared not defy Belushisham. And why? Because of the heritage that you deny me. It's mine. Tradition demands that he be passed from father to son. You can still heal the rift in the pattern." "Show me the rune." "No, it's profane. It will die with me. It twists nature against her will. I deny you the knowledge of the Dark Lord, though already he snares you in his web." She looked straight into his eyes. "Be in the light. Remember the essence of your father's teachings, not his mistakes." Michaela became still, as if considering her words. As he spoke, Helena knew he lied. "My daughter, stay with me. You had the best of my father. Share his wisdom with me." She shook her head. "I named my son for you, calling him Mikhail. If you want your father's teachings, ask Belushisham's spirit for guidance, and pray the wise Lord for the strength to keep to the righteous path. Beyond this, I offer nothing." Michaela's lips tightened into a thin line. His eyes shifted to the left. Following them, Helena saw Attila and Ishiat galloping hard toward their small group. "My lord approaches," Valimir said. Attila and Ishiat reined in their horses into a sliding halt. Michaela sneered. As Attila's eyes probed his face, the Persian's haughty expression changed into one of grudging respect. "So, Helena," Attila said in Greek, "you've been reunited with your father." Inclining his head, he acknowledged Michaela. Your daughter has shown courage and integrity, qualities I look forward to discovering in her father. Lord Attila, Valamir said, this is Michaelia, the commander of the imperial force. Michaelia, Lord Attila, nephew of King Ruglava of the Huns. Both men studied the other, each seeking signs of weakness. I thank you, Lord Attila, for ensuring my daughter's safety. She looks well. Indeed, the gods have been generous to Prince Valamir. Hostility shadows Michaelia's face, but he suppressed it. We have much to discuss. The Emperor himself will be pleased by your rescue of Altir, by your capture of the traitor. You shall have your reward. You are most generous, Michaelia, but winter nips at our horses' hooves. We travel westward to our domain. Say, pass the winter of Ishkar, where the weather is warm. It is our holy city. Its sacredness guarantees your safety. Your offer is noble, but my men long for home. Yet I'm surprised that your emperor would send you searching for a child of such importance with empty hands. Of course, we have something to offer, but it's not nearly enough. He lowered his voice as if to a fellow conspirator, glancing pointedly at Helena. I have another matter that might interest you. Follow us back to the hills, Michaelia. You can set up camp near us. We'll keep enough distance between the men to preserve the peace. Why not here? In moments, my men could erect a tent. Your offer is kind, but in my quarters, you'd be able to see Altir. Agreed, Michaelia said. We'll follow you. My daughter is surety of you and our camp's safety. That is noble. We place our trust in our horses' swift legs and the aim of our arrows. We ride. Command your men to follow. Without another word, Attila wheeled his horse, signaling their departure. As Lena felt Pascal burst under her into a gallop, she did not look back, her heart feeling lighter with each stride away from Michaelia. Attila shouted to her, Sad to leave your father? The wind pummeled her face, stealing all but the loudest of words. No, she said. He smiled with cynical amusement. Indeed, we must speak more of this before I meet him again. As they reached the Hunnic line, their horses stretched out into a run. Not slowing the pace, Attila roared with exultation. The Huns answered him with a masculine roar that sent involuntary chills down Helena's spine. The sound still frightened her. She hoped that it gave her father pause. Following Attila, the mounted force galloped towards camp, easily outpacing the Persians. Helena glanced at Valamir, riding at her side, and longed to be alone with him, wanting to reaffirm their love and to dispel her bitter disappointment with her father. She hoped there would be time. So, Helena's father, I don't know anybody like him, but it's how I saw it, because women, we've come a long way in the 21st. Here we are in 2020, but it wasn't always good to be a woman back in the day. So, and he saw her as just something to use, and he wasn't part of her life. Where her grandfather was a completely different guy, except for his penchant for having the dark power. So that's it. So she meets her. It all came back full circle. You started out. There was her father, and it's probable. He was a Persian commander, and Altir was missing. So you have to wait till next week to see what happens.